So you need to write a resume. And the problem is, you don't know how to write one. After all, that's why you're watching this video. Well, good news. I'm going to break down my method for writing resumes that's helped hundreds of my students get jobs. Now, there are 7 key sections that you need to have to write a fantastic resume. And make sure you stay for a bonus section at the end because it's super important if you're light on work experience. Folks, my name is Michael Saad. Hello! I'm a communications professor, and the #1 thing I work on with my students is career prep. So this includes resumes, cover letters, interview skills, public speaking, and networking. And I've spent years perfecting strategies that have helped people get hired. And I want to help you too. So before we dive in, let's talk about what a resume actually is. Is it a summary of skills? Is it an outline of your work history? Is it that thing you hate writing? No. More than anything, a resume is a persuasive document. You're literally writing this thing to convince an employer to give you an interview. So this means you need to be strategic with your formatting, your organization, the words you use, and the content that you include. All of this needs to be packaged so that it persuades employers and shows them exactly why you're the best applicant. If an employer has to fight to figure out how you're right for the job, you're probably not getting an interview. But if your resume takes away that guesswork and tells them exactly how you're qualified with zero effort on their part, an interview is a no-brainer. So, every choice you make in your resume, ask yourself, will this make it more persuasive? And a way to help you do that is to make your resume scannable. A 2018 study by theladders.com found that on average, recruiters will skim a resume for only 7.4 seconds. What this means is you need to organize your resume in a way that makes it extremely easy to read and even easier for an employer to connect the dots on your qualifications. The more scannable it is, the more persuasive it is. Also realize that there's no perfect way to write a resume. Everyone thinks that they have the solution, but they don't. Not even me. But I'm going to show you a method that works for me and has worked for my students. But there's a lot of equally effective versions out there, so don't think you're tied to just one method. Okay, let's get to the main event and show you how to write a very persuasive resume. The first section is the header with your contact information. Now, the non-negotiables for this section are your name, phone number, and email address. And make sure it's an adult email address, not superspark22@gmail.com. I know you've had one of those because I've had one too. I'm not telling you what it is. In this section, you can also put a physical mailing address or at least the city you're located in. This is really helpful if you're applying for a job in the city where you live because it tells the employer you have a great sense of the area. Also, it's super effective to include your LinkedIn URL. If you don't have LinkedIn, get LinkedIn. It's free, it rules. And be sure to check out this quick video on how to customize your LinkedIn URL so it looks real clean on your resume. Finally, if you happen to have a website or a portfolio, include the URL for that as well. And quick note, if you're posting this resume online somewhere, think about making a second version that leaves out your phone number and your email address. Unless you don't care if people see that information, but I would care. Don't post your personal information online. Okay, in your second section, you're going to list about 8 to 10 relevant skills that make you right for the job. This is where a lot of people stumble because they tend to write generic phrases like team player and hard worker and fast learner. Oh, these are nothing but $10 phrases. They're just buzzwords that describe nothing about your abilities. And even worse, every applicant is going to write these phrases. So how's that going to separate you from the pack? You need to be more specific. So instead, pull up the job posting and look for the specific skills they list in the job requirements. For each one that's relevant to you, put it down on your resume in this section. You're literally listing the skills they're looking for and telling the employer, I have these skills. It's super persuasive because there's no guesswork. And if you happen to have some skills that aren't listed on the job posting, but they're still relevant to the job, put them down in this section. Here's what a listing of skills should look like. I like to put them in about 2 to 3 columns to fill the white space and make my resume look fuller, and I only use about 2 to 3 words max to describe each skill. What's also great about the relevant skills section is if your application is put through an application tracking system or an ATS where they track keywords to see if your application is a good fit, pulling those skills straight from the job posting is going to help please the ATS algorithm and flag your application as a good potential fit for the job. All right, the third section is your education. Now, there's some debate about whether you should list your work experience before your education, but I like to list education higher for two reasons. The first is it's almost always the first qualification listed on a job description. Employers are likely going to be looking for this section first, so make it easy for them and list it right up top. Now, the second reason is your education section is likely going to be smaller than your work experience section. And if you place this below your work experience, it'll just get buried in the middle of your resume, and basically a very important section might not get the attention it needs from hiring managers. Now, your education listing should be very simple. List the credential you gained, like a degree or a diploma, and then list your major or your program. Put those on the same line. And below that, list the school and the dates where you attended. If you're still in school, you can put what year you're in. And if you're about a year less from graduating, you can write your expected graduation date. The fourth section is your professional experience. There is some strategy to this section though, so pay close attention to this section. In terms of how you list your job history, I'm a fan of most recent job first. Show me where you are now, not where you were 5 years ago. Make it easy for me to see your current employment situation. For the actual job entry, first list your job title. And below that, list the employer, the location, and the dates you were employed. Now, you don't have to put the months that you were employed. If you were a summer student or maybe had a limited contract for under a year, just put the year. And below that, include a 1 to 2 sentence summary of what the overall position included. Make sure that you're direct and concise and describe what your responsibilities were. Again, make it only about 2 sentences max. Now, here's where things get strategic. Under each job entry, you want to add about 4 to 6 bullet points outlining what you accomplished in the job. So what do I mean by this? You don't just want to say what your responsibilities were, but also what you accomplished through those responsibilities. And these are called accomplishment statements or achievement statements, where you list tangible outcomes of what you achieved in the job. So take a look at this entry. You'll notice this listing of skills is pretty generic. It tells employers your responsibilities and some tasks you completed, but it doesn't indicate how successful you were or what you achieved from having those responsibilities. But if we change these statements into achievements, look what happens. Now employers can not only see what your responsibilities were, but also how well you performed those responsibilities. By showing what you achieved in the job, you're telling the employer, this is what I accomplished in my previous job, and this is what I could potentially do for you. The employer doesn't have to work to figure that out for themselves. There's a few reasons that you want to include accomplishment statements. First, if you just list your responsibilities and another applicant lists the same responsibilities, on paper, you're equally qualified for the job. But if you list the tangible outcomes that you achieved, you're now separating yourself from other applicants. They can list the same responsibilities, but they can't list the same accomplishments. Now, the second reason to list accomplishments goes back to what I've been saying all along. It's simply more persuasive. If you can directly show an employer what you achieved in a previous job, they don't have to figure out what you could achieve for them. And a final tip for job entries, keep each bullet point to a single line and limit the total number of bullet points to about 5 or 6 for each job entry. This not only keeps your resume scannable, but it also helps you exercise restraint and avoid overloading your resume with a lot of unnecessary content. We are so afraid of missing important information that we usually end up writing way too much. And that makes your resume very complicated and very bloated with content. And no one's going to want to read that. By setting limits on your resume though, and sticking to them, you're going to eliminate a lot of jargon and create a clear, more persuasive resume. Set a limit, stay within it. All right, your fifth section is your volunteer experience. Now, obviously you can skip this section if you don't have any volunteer experience, although I'd recommend you do get some. You want to structure this section exactly like your professional experience section. This is still work, even if it's unpaid work. So list the volunteer role, the organization, the location, the dates you worked for this organization, and brief bullet points of what you achieved in the role. And set limits on each entry. Now, the reason you want to place emphasis on volunteer experience is it says to the employer that you're willing to do work even though you're not getting paid for it. And no, this doesn't give the impression that your boss can call you in on a Saturday and expect you to show up. What volunteer work suggests is that you're willing to take initiative, go above and beyond, and assist where needed, even if there isn't some financial incentive to do it. It shows a lot of leadership traits and that you're a motivated person, and employers really like that. Okay, the sixth section is to list additional skills. Now, you might be thinking, but Mike, I just listed my skills. Yes, you listed the more relevant and notable skills. This section is an area you can list all those nice to know generic skills that aren't going to make or break you as an applicant. Things like Microsoft Office, first aid, other languages, a driver's license, skills employers kind of expect you to have but aren't so vital that you need to list them at the top of your resume. So unless the job posting lists a generic skill as extremely important, just place it in this section. Finally, your seventh section lists any awards, achievements, or major acknowledgements that you've received in your career. Now, here you have some flexibility. If you're fresh out of school, it's great to list any clubs or teams that you were on or any awards you received while you were in school. If you had some athletic accomplishments, definitely list those too. And no, rec slow pitch champion doesn't count. Now, as you go further on in your career, start to replace these achievements with ones that are more career related and gradually transition them to only professional acknowledgements. I mean, unless you went to the Olympics, leave that one on forever. The entry for an accomplishment or achievement is simply the award, the organization, and if necessary, a bullet point or two on what the achievement actually is, if it's not obvious already. Okay, bonus tip. This is a question I get a lot. What if I don't have any relevant work experience, or I don't have any work experience at all? If you don't have any relevant work experience, the best experience you can have is likely your education. So lean into everything you did while you were at school. So here's a few things you can do with this. Under your education section, list some key courses that you took to show that you've been trained in areas that the position requires. A second thing you can do is, in place of your professional experience, add a section titled Major Projects. Now, you're going to format and structure this section exactly like your professional experience section, but instead, you're going to list major projects that you worked on during school and treat each of them like a job entry. Again, this can show that you have some hands-on experience, even though it was during school. Now, what about any unrelated work experience? Do you still list this? Yes, absolutely you do. There's always indirect experience that can be relevant to a job. So things like time management, team management, organizational skills, you can still extract a lot of experience from jobs that aren't directly related to what you're applying for. You just might have to be a little bit more intentional in showing it. And that, folks, is my process for crafting a professional, persuasive, and scannable resume that gets noticed by employers. If you follow this structure, you're really going to give yourself a competitive edge against other applicants. Now, something I recommend is to make a master resume document and customize it for each job that you apply to. Use different skills, highlight certain experience, and have your resume tailor-made for each application. And below, I've included resume templates and a resume checklist that you can use to craft your own resume exactly like what I've shown you in this video. So look for it in the link below. Anyhow, hope this has been helpful, and hey, good luck on your job hunt. And be sure to leave a comment below if you have any additional questions, comments, or concerns about resume building, career prep, or just general communication skills. See you later!